What if the most dangerous moment in human history, the Cuban Missile Crisis, was not a surprise at all, but the direct consequence of a secret war the United States had already been waging for over a year? Buried in thousands of pages of declassified Cuba documents sits a paper trail so explosive that it rewrites the Cold War as we know it. Its codename was Operation Mongoose, and its mission was nothing less than the destruction of Fidel Castro's government, by any means necessary. On November 30th, 1961, President John F. Kennedy signed a top-secret memorandum authorizing what would become the largest covert operation ever mounted against a foreign government in the Western Hemisphere. The document, later declassified by the National Security Archive, directed Attorney General Robert Kennedy to oversee a program of sabotage, subversion, and psychological warfare designed to, quote, help Cuba overthrow the communist regime. The project was given the codename Operation Mongoose, and its operational chief was Air Force Brigadier General Edward Lansdale, a veteran of counterinsurgency warfare in the Philippines and Vietnam. Lansdale drafted a master plan with 33 distinct tasks, ranging from propaganda campaigns and economic disruption to paramilitary raids and the contamination of Cuban sugar exports. But what the declassified paperwork reveals, and what the Kennedy administration publicly denied for decades, is that regime change wasn't the ceiling of this operation, it was the floor, and the plans that sat above it were far darker. In 1975, the Church Committee, a Senate investigation led by Senator Frank Church, forced the CIA to acknowledge what no one in Washington wanted to admit. The agency had repeatedly attempted to assassinate Fidel Castro. The committee's final report, running over 300 pages, documented at least 8 distinct CIA Castro assassination plots between 1960 and 1965. The methods read like rejected Bond scripts, poisoned cigars, a contaminated diving suit, an exploding seashell, and a ballpoint pen fitted with a hypodermic needle loaded with a lethal toxin called Blackleaf 40. But the most disturbing plot involved no gadgets at all. Declassified memoranda from the CIA's Office of the Inspector General confirmed that the agency recruited Chicago mob boss Sam Giancana and Tampa crime lord Santos Traficante to carry out a contract killing on Castro, channeling the arrangement through a private intermediary named Robert Mayhew. These Kennedy covert operations were compartmentalized so tightly that even CIA Director John McCone later testified he was never fully briefed. The question that haunted investigators then, and haunts historians now, is exactly how high the authorization went. General Lansdale's operational plan, declassified in full in 1989, and now available through the National Security Archive at George Washington University, laid out a 6-phase timetable for the destruction of Castro's government. Phase 1, running from March through July 1962, called for intelligence collection and the recruitment of dissident networks inside Cuba. Phase 2 escalated to active sabotage, the destruction of oil refineries, power plants, and transportation infrastructure. The documents reveal that CIA operatives conducted over 100 separate acts of sabotage during this period, including the burning of sugarcane fields and the mining of Cuban harbors. Lansdale's Phase 6, scheduled for October 1962, envisioned a popular uprising supported by direct U.S. military intervention, essentially a second invasion. A memo from Lansdale to the special group Augmented, the interagency oversight body chaired by Robert Kennedy, explicitly states that the operation's objective was to bring about the revolt of the Cuban people, to be completed in time for the October deadline. That deadline was not arbitrary, and what happened in October 1962 would bring the world closer to nuclear annihilation than it had ever been, or has been since. For decades, the standard narrative of the Cuban Missile Crisis held that Nikita Khrushchev placed nuclear missiles in Cuba as a geopolitical gambit, a bold power play to shift the strategic balance. But declassified Cuba documents from both American and Soviet archives tell a far more complicated story. Soviet records, released after the Cold War, revealed that Khrushchev's decision to deploy missiles was motivated in significant part by Cuban Missile Crisis secrets the Soviets had uncovered, specifically intelligence about Operation Mongoose and the likelihood of a second American invasion. A 1962 cable from Soviet Ambassador Alexander Alexeyev to Moscow warned that CIA sabotage operations were intensifying and that Castro genuinely feared an imminent U.S. military strike. Castro himself, in a 1992 retrospective conference in Havana, attended by former U.S. officials, including Robert McNamara, confirmed that he requested Soviet missiles precisely because of the covert war being waged against his government. McNamara, visibly shaken during the exchange, later admitted that the Kennedy administration had never fully considered how Mongoose might look from the other side. The implication is staggering. The secret campaign designed to topple Castro may have been the very catalyst that placed nuclear warheads 90 miles from American soil. Operation Mongoose was officially shut down in January 1963, after the resolution of the missile crisis made its continuation politically untenable. But the covert infrastructure it built did not disappear. Declassified documents show that the CIA continued running anti-Castro operations under new code names, Amtrunk, Amlash, and others, well into the mid-1960s. The Amlash operation, which involved cultivating a senior Cuban military official named Rolando Cubella to assassinate Castro, was active on the very day President Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas on November 22, 1963. A coincidence that the House Select Committee on Assassinations investigated extensively in the late 1970s. The committee concluded that it could not rule out the possibility that anti-Castro operations had generated blowback that contributed to the events in Dealey Plaza. Today, thousands of pages of Mongoose-related documents remain available through the JFK Assassination Records Collection and the CIA's Electronic Reading Room. They paint a portrait of an administration willing to cross nearly every legal and ethical boundary in pursuit of regime change, and of an intelligence apparatus that operated with a degree of autonomy that still unsettles scholars. The full truth of what happened between Washington, Langley, and Havana in those years may never be completely known. But the paper trail that survived tells us this much. The official story was never the whole story. And some of the most dangerous secrets weren't hidden in vaults. They were hidden in plain sight. If this video opened your eyes, subscribe and hit the bell, because next week we're pulling the thread on another declassified operation that the government spent decades pretending never existed. You won't want to miss it.